Good morning, Illini! And whether you're new with us or you've been with us on this journey a while, I just want to say welcome, and we're glad you're here at Healthy Illini. I'm your host, Matt Schrock, and we always say it at the end of the podcast that you are on a personal journey, and I'm grateful you've chosen to spend part of that time with us. So let's continue on that path today as we keep you well to excel. Today we're talking about something quite popular on college campuses, but not always a popular discussion topic. Our point of focus is alcohol and nutrition. And often, if alcohol is addressed, it is in a fairly negative way, and that doesn't have to be the case. Like any other food or beverage, there's a balance to how alcohol is consumed if a person so chooses. So I'm thrilled to be joined by my guest today, and I want to take a moment to welcome him here. First, welcome back Ashley. Ashley Peters. If you listened to our previous episode on eating disorders, you will remember her. She's one of our dietitians here at McKinley and works out of the health ed department. Thanks for being here, Ashley.
Great to be here. And
we're also joined by a student at UIUC, Erin Crispo, one of the nutrition peers at McKinley. She's a sophomore in dietetics, Thanks for being here, Erin.
Thanks for having me.
So, as I said, alcohol is just like any other food or beverage that we put in our bodies. Balance and moderation are important, but it's also important to look at the things we do and choices we make prior to drinking, during drinking, and after, and how that affects us. So, Ashley, let's start with you. I feel like when discussing alcohol, it's often viewed as a standalone event, but really it's much more complicated than that. As a starting point, how does nutrition interact with a drinking experience?
Yeah, so you'll kind of notice a theme here of, like you said, before, during, and after. And as I'm sitting with a client one-on-one and I'm counseling someone, that's kind of how I try to set them up for success. I try to talk about the before drinking concerns that they might have, I might have, the during, food choices that they make while drinking beverages that they're choosing, and then after. I try to pay attention to intuitively, how is that making them feel? How is their mental health the next day? Where are their thoughts going the next day? So drinking is not just something that we're looking at as a one-off. Oh, you went out and you drank these calories and now you need to feel like guilty or shame about them, but how can we set you up for success? We know our college students are drinking. We know they're going to the bars. How can we better educate them before they do so?
And it's important to look at it as drinking as a nutrition choice. We often separate the two. You have your food and your drink nutrition-wise, and then you have alcohol as this excess or separate category. But really, they all just kind of intermix together. And it's not just what you drink with alcohol that affects how it affects you, but also the other food choices you're making that interact with that. And that's something that we really want to look into in where we go forward from here.
Yeah. So I think Erin can give some really great perspective of what are some thoughts college students are having. Say they know they're going out that night and it's Friday morning. Erin, do you want to give some perspective of like what you think college students might have preconceived notions about, or what you might think that they are thinking about their food selections that day?
Yeah, so being a sophomore, last year when I was a freshman, I lived in the dorms, and this year I'm now in a house with a lot of other girls. So I am exposed to all of the students' thoughts and seeing everyone else in their food choices, like the nights they go out, and even myself. I mean, I'm a student too. I still have those thoughts, and a lot of people aren't knowledgeable on the nutrition topics with alcohol and everything. So I do have to say a lot of people, and I've overheard a lot of people, the night they're going out or even like a few days prior, they're like, oh, I can't eat as much because I'm going to be consuming all of my calories and alcohol. Or the next day, if they binged on a lot of food after consuming a lot of alcohol, they feel really a lot of guilt, and they exercise or they just don't eat that day. So being a student here, I've observed and heard a lot of conversations about that.
Yeah, and I see that with a lot of my patients too, where they're worried about how they're going to look in their outfit that night. So they will change their food choices, but they will restrict that day. Maybe intentionally, maybe not intentionally, depending on what's going on, and then wonder why they got so drunk from consuming. Like, they'll tell me, I drink the same amount that I normally drink, and I got really drunk. And so we can alternate change up how you're eating right before going out, so that way we can set you up for a little bit better success. So eating just like a protein and a vegetable before you go drinking, that's not really going to soak anything up in your stomach. And so that night you might be like, wow, I wasn't able to handle my alcohol like I normally can. I got way more drunk than I normally do. So making sure you're having a balanced meal before going out, and make sure you're really hydrating. So I want to see like a balanced meal, which would be a protein, a grain, especially grains like bread, rice, toast, any kinds of carbohydrates is really going to help level out your alcohol metabolism, so that way you aren't feeling as drunk as quickly.
We could almost call it pre-gaming the pre-game.
Mm-hmm.
You have to plan before you go out, because you do have that what you eat influences how quickly alcohol affects you. I want to dive into the pre just a little bit deeper. You talked a lot about there's two kind of competing ideas here. There's one that people get caught off guard because they're trying to limit calories,
Mm-hmm.
and so they're counting the alcohol as calories, and they limit the other nutritional needs before, and that has the alcohol affect them more. The other side is there's people that limit the intake because they want the buzz. So really, what we're talking about here is, because we're in the before drinking stage. We're kind of talking about pre-gaming the pre-game, where you're planning out how you're going to go into your evening. And for somebody, there's two different ideas that are going on here. One is you want to make sure that you are taking care of your nutritional needs, even if you're concerned about calorie intake. And that's where some people, they try and cut back, and so they end up finding themselves unexpectedly feeling more effects. But there are some that do want to feel some effects. Is there a better way to approach both of those, where it's not just eat more so that you can get drunk and not worry about it, or it's not just eat this so you feel it faster, but what's the balance what's the best way to approach it from a nutritional standpoint?
I think a lot of college students are doing this like pre-game mentality, and then by the time they get to the bar, they are already like pretty excessively drunk. So making sure to have that meal to kind of like slow down a little bit. It's a long night. Those bars stay out. The bars stay open pretty late. And I think most of the time we're seeing where the college students are showing up to the bar already pretty intoxicated, and keeping track of your alcohol intake. So just like a lot of students think about pre-gaming and the drinking that's going to go on before they even get to the bar, I almost encourage like a pre-game to the pre-game. Like, what are you going to eat to set you up for success? It's a long night ahead of you. Some students show up already to the bar pretty intoxicated. The bars stay open very late. So how can you kind of set yourself up better so that way by 2 o'clock in the morning, you still are able to make good decisions for yourself. You're still able to be safe. Like, you're still aware of your surroundings, those types of things. So I highly encourage students to kind of think about, if they know they're going to go out and if they are choosing to drink, that they need to set themselves up better for that. And that includes like a perfectly well-balanced meal before going out. You will feel so much better if you set yourself up in that way. And even thinking about the hydration too, like alcohol is a diuretic. It makes you go to the bathroom more, and that's part of the hangover, right? Like, so dehydrated the next day. So kind of doing a little bit of pre-planning there as well to make sure you're getting your water intake high.
And the pre-planning you're talking about isn't just before, it's also planning what you're going to do during, what you're going to do after. We'll touch base on those in a moment. Do you have any advice, and either one of you, Aaron, you can jump in on this as well. Do you have any advice or thoughts on a student who's going drinking for the first time, a first-time experience, and you don't have any, this is what I normally drink, or this is how it normally affects me? From a nutritional standpoint, is there any sort of recommendation for a student who's going to drink for the first time?
Aaron, have you been surrounded by a lot of college students who had never drank prior to coming to college?
Yeah, I would say either they've never drank or they've never drank to the extent that people do in college, just because we don't have our parents here, whatever. And I think a lot of people are caught off guard because with the dining hall food and everything, I mean, you just have a ton of conversations and people saying, "Oh, I'm just not going to eat tonight." Oh, like, "Oh, I didn't eat. Like, I don't need to eat before I go out." And people who haven't drank before or haven't drank to that extent, that can really affect them. And I think food almost has a negative like connotation on a college campus when it comes to drinking, not with everyone, but a lot of people just associate like food before going out, like that equals I can't have as much fun or all of the above. Yeah, and like I was saying about how people choose to not eat or they just choose to not make an effort to eat before going out. Even if you can still have fun and have a balanced meal before, which is what you want to do because then you are able to last the whole night, you're able to enjoy yourself and you won't be sick the next day and everything. So I think that's really important to prioritize eating a balanced meal and it's not a bad thing at all to eat before you go out.
Yeah, I think when college students get here, some things they can do to set them up for success if they've never drank before is first, just do it with a small group of people. So if you've got a handful of friends, like staying at an apartment, kind of seeing like what does your tolerance look like? How many alcoholic beverages? Like until you're not paying attention to what your tolerance is, tracking like how many drinks you're having, whether that be pulling off the tabs to the drink and putting it in your pocket to kind of see like, okay, I've had 2 drinks. Now I need to kind of see how am I feeling about that? Keep the straws. Like if you go to a bar and you get a mixed drink, take the straw from the old drink, put it in the new drink. You can kind of count the straws and kind of see, okay, I've had 3 drinks. And if you need a ballpark idea, about a drink an hour. And a lot of my students might be kind of surprised to hear a drink an hour. They're like, wow, that sounds like a lot. And sometimes when I'm asking students, how much did you drink last night? They'll be like, oh, I had like 6 drinks, 7 drinks, a couple shots. And I'll be like, I can't even get you to drink 6 to 8 glasses of water a day, but you can just get those alcoholic beverages down really quickly. And that's because while drinking, there is this behavior where people just keep drinking, especially through a straw. They don't take time to like wait, see the effects. And it's just like, let's get another one and slurp that one down, and let's get another one and slurp that down. And encouraging my students that you don't have to keep up with anyone. If this is your first time drinking, don't think that everyone is going to get another round and like, okay, I need to get another round too. That's one of the biggest mistakes. Other people might have other experiences with alcohol. They might have partaken with alcohol before. If this is your first time, like you do not have to keep up with everyone else.
The discussion is kind of has moved into the kind of during, which is good for where I wanted to go. We talked about the pregame, we talked about the before, all those things. Now we're getting into the during. We talked a little bit about being aware of pressure to drink, being aware of counting the number of drinks you've had, kind of keeping track on that. But what are some other things to look for? What's the things to be aware of from a nutritional standpoint? I mean, I know we talked about calories, because people don't often eat beforehand because they are counting calories. Is there a way to be cognizant of that? Is there a way to be aware of that in the bar? From a student perspective, does that, Aaron, is that something anyone even thinks about? Or is that something that we're talking about, but is it really in the general conversation of a student going out and whether with friends in a bar, at a party, at home, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I would say it's pretty hard here because when you go out to the bar, there isn't anywhere to get food, really. So you're kind of stuck with what you ate before, and while you're drinking, like you really have no other choice. So if you didn't have a good meal before, you're kind of screwed while drinking with your friends at the bar or whatever until you leave. But I would say I have noticed, even on like Saturday game days where you're out all day at the bars, like people have brought like snacks in their purse or their little clutch purses or even in their jackets, which I think is important to bring that to the bar because if you're out all day or even for the night, I mean, your body will let you know when it needs food. And especially when you're consuming alcohol, I think it's important to eat food while drinking just so then it can be absorbed and you aren't left the next day feeling terrible or that you end up throwing up because there's no food left in your system and the alcohol is just there.
that also touches into a safety topic, safety perspective.
Mhm.
Which, Ashley, you were talking about before we started recording, that it's really important to be aware of these types of things from a safety perspective. Would you want to touch on that just a bit?
Yeah, I think it's good to kind of have a buddy system when you decide to go out and drinking, looking out for one another. Like if you showed up at the bar with 5 people, we need to be leaving the bar with 5 people. We don't leave anyone behind. We kind of have someone like evaluating, like, how's everyone doing? We make sure that we're Ubering home, that there's like cars can be left. It's fine. Like leave the car behind, grab an Uber. Make sure no one's leaving with anyone else that you didn't initially come with. So I think it's really important to like be aware of like, this is the people we came with, this is the plan, and we're all leaving together tonight as well.
You can also use that buddy system for not just for safety, but for a bit of accountability.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a plan going out, and you have a plan with your group, it doesn't have to be just an individual plan. It could be a plan with the group where you say, okay, this is how many drinks I'm looking for tonight, or this is what I'm looking to drink tonight, and you have somebody else who's kind of keeping tabs on that with you as well.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another during that can really help out with that and make those choices together. Because that comes back to the whole pressure to drink more. A lot of the reason there's pressure is that nobody talks about it. And so there's an assumption that, well, the other person expects me to do certain things.
Mhm.
Where if you have that conversation with your close friends, it can actually take away some of that stigma and take away some of that nervousness, where you know that this is the expectation I have, this is the expectation that they have, and it actually sets you up in a pretty good position from a safety standpoint as well.
Yeah. We can also pretend that we're drinking when we're not really drinking. And so if that means you need to alternate your drinks and have an alcoholic beverage and then do a tonic and water with a lime, do a Coke with a lime, and make it look like you have a drink because you don't want to catch slack from your friends for not going and get that next round. And then also like thinking about like, should we be giving each other slack for something like that? Like also like, what are you pressuring people into doing? Everyone needs to be making their own choices. Everyone needs to be getting like their own drinks. So kind of alternating drinks, having two, then having a water, that is going to make you feel so much better the next day if you get some water in the night before.
And before we get to the third stage, which is the after, but that ties into what you said about your own choices, ties into what we talk a lot about here on Healthy Illini. It's really important, is that we're all on our own personal journey.
Mm-hmm.
That everybody's journey looks a little bit different. That there are some shared experiences and common experiences, but there's also unique experiences. And so it's important to remember that when we're going into that, we're talking about alcohol, but you may be listening and saying, well, I don't want to drink. That's great. If that's your personal choice, that's fantastic. If you're like, well, I do want to go drink. If that's your personal choice, that's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
It's about being healthy with it and being in moderation and making choices with nutrition. But certainly you're on your own journey, and we just want to help support and facilitate wherever you are in that journey. So let's jump ahead because we're running out of time if we don't. The third stage we want to talk about is the after.
Mm-hmm.
You've done your pregame, you've gone out with friends or the bar or whatever it may be, and then now you're at the end of the night. And so what are some choices that you can make that are from a nutrition standpoint that are good, so to avoid the hangover the next day, to avoid some of the other things like some guilt or just not feeling well in general? What are some things that students can do? What perspectives can they take?
I think a lot of guilt comes from what are we going to get after we go to the bar? Like where are some common places that people are going after they're drinking on UIUC campus?
Like Burrito King, Jurassic Grill, Vinny's, all of that.
Yeah, and so that just sounds to me like carbs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what your body is wanting after drinking. It wants those carbs because you just put toxins in your body. Your body's trying to get those toxins out. So that is like a biological effect of why are we hungry after eating? Your body is producing ghrelin, which is a hunger hormone, to get you to eat, to get you to have an appetite, so that way it can sober you up. And there's no need to feel like guilt and shame about that. It's a protective mechanism that your body is doing to keep you well. So yeah, we should be eating afterwards. Like, we do need to sober up. It's fine if you go get some pizza. It's fine if you go get a sandwich, things like that, because that is what your body is wanting you to do in order to feel better.
And I think people, like, during the moment after drinking, they want to go get food, they're fine, but a lot of the problems are the next day,
Mm-hmm.
where people are like, "Oh, I really did eat almost a whole pizza," or, "Oh, I had this big sandwich that I normally wouldn't have eaten if I wasn't drinking," or
Mm-hmm.
late at night, just and people think that eating past 8 p.m. or something is bad, which it's not at all. I mean, if your body is wanting food, that you should honor your body's cravings. And I've seen people who do eat late at night after drinking. They're like, "Oh, I can't eat the next day. I need to exercise, all the calories off," which is not the case. I mean, it's all about balance. Your body, after drinking, wanted that food, and you honored your body with that food, and it's completely fine. And you just go on the next day eating 3 meals, and don't starve yourself or punish yourself for balancing your schoolwork and going out with your friends.
Yeah. Yep. Starting the next day with like, we don't have to restrict. Restriction leads to obsession. So we're just going to start that next day with a perfectly balanced breakfast and get ourselves like reacclimated, focusing on water, focusing on hydration the next day. That's what's going to make you feel your best.
I feel like there's a possibility, I could be wrong, that there's a possibility of a vicious cycle here.
Mhm.
That if before you don't eat, then you're starving at the end, so you do eat,
Yep.
and you might, in your own mind, overeat, and then you end up with the guilt the next day from that shame cycle. In your experience, in either of your experiences, is it, if you have that pregame plan, that meal you eat beforehand, does that lessen the likelihood of the binge eating afterwards?
Not necessarily, because it depends on how many alcoholic beverages were consumed, because that gremlin's still going to be released. But I think it does set you up. You're going to be better like at making decisions for yourself. Like making decisions, it gets really hard for yourself after drinking. And so you might make some better decisions. That might be an aspect, but I think there's no need to feel guilty after eating, after drinking, because that is just like a part of the connection. Like that's what your body wants to do.
I really appreciate that you said not necessarily, because again, all the things we're talking about are not necessarily a exact plan. This is how it has to be, and this is how it works and how it affects. These are our recommendations for better choices.
Yep.
And that's really, with a lot of nutrition, that's what it is better choices is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and being really intuitive. So something I work with my students on is, how are you mentally feeling the next day after drinking? So are you constantly worrying about every conversation you had with someone? Like, is your anxiety at an all-time high? Alcohol is a depressant. And people are like, no, it's not. I'm having such a good time. Like, look how much more social I am. And I'm like, no, check out how you feel the next day. Like, once those effects are worn off, how are you feeling? And be intuitive about that. I coach on intuitive eating all the time. Intuitive drinking is a thing too. So find what feels really good to you. Like, oh, I can intuitively have 3 glasses of wine throughout the night. Great. Or you do not mix well with wine. Okay, note to self, wine does not work for me. It dehydrates me. It makes me feel really crummy. Like maybe you get the body aches off of it. So just like intuitive eating, think about intuitive drinking. How is this making you feel? And then how are you setting yourself up for the beginning of the week as well? So the Sunday scaries is real when you've been like binge drinking all weekend and not taking care of yourself. And then you think about all the things you have to accomplish on Monday. So if you constantly find yourself there, like we can still go out. We still need to be social. We still want you to go cheer on like the Fighting Illini and do all those fun things. But if it's affecting your mental health and it's affecting like your thoughts the next day about all the interactions you had, it's time to rethink some things. And like, how can we scale back? Or how can we eat a balanced meal before so we don't feel quite as crummy the next day? All these things could be really beneficial if you just find yourself the next day in a total panic to start that Monday.
Everything you've talked about so far, what I'm understanding is that it's a central theme of self-awareness, of self-reflection, of just, moving internally to see how things are affecting you. But let's say somebody is doing those things and still struggling. They're still going through the cycle, the cycle of guilt, all those things, or they're just struggling to find a balance, or even know where to start with a pregame plan. If you need help outside of yourself, what are some, what are resources here? Like, basically, I would like, yeah, actually, you work here at McKinley. Aaron, you're part of the Nutrition Peers.
Mm-hmm.
What do you guys offer to students who are like, man, I just need a little help on this journey?
Yeah, they can book a one-on-one appointment with a dietitian to kind of learn, like, what is a balanced meal? What are carbs? What's going to make me feel better? If they're feeling a lot of guilt and shame, like maybe it's not just guilt and shame around food. Maybe it's like around your body and your relationship with your body. I think we're also going to list some different resources throughout the campus and the community in the description below that students have access to as well.
So Nutrition Peers has a YouTube, and they have a YouTube series called Kale Yes, and there's a lot of nutritional information and just advice from the dietitian on how to have a balanced diet, and just a lot of like nutrition information that not a lot of people know. So you can easily look that up on your phone, so you don't have to go out of your way and go to McKinley to talk to people or whatever. There's also the Nutrition Peers Instagram that you can look at, where there's a lot of like nutrition information on that. And I know like at the ARC, they have like nutrition coaching and nutritional kitchens and everything. So if you go there, you can find your way around and seek help that way.
There are a lot of resources here on campus, whether it be McKinley, whether it be the ARC, or the Nutrition Peers, and we have that information for you in our bio. Unfortunately, we're out of time. Ashley, Aaron, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
To be healthy and well, we should be intentional about the food and beverages we consume, and alcohol is no different. And drinking alcohol is a choice. It's not something that we're saying you should or should not do. Simply trying to give some tips and ideas and options for if you do make that choice. Because understanding balance and how you can have balance with alcohol and your other nutritional needs is important, and it will help affect how you feel during, before, and then the next day. But if something we've discussed today has piqued your interest, or you have questions or comments, please reach out to us here. We'd love to continue the conversation with you. If you feel like you might need a little extra help or a little extra support, you can find resources in our description through McKinley, through the peers, and they'd love to help out with that as well. Thank you for joining us today. You're on a personal journey no matter where you are in it. You are important. You matter. Your health and wellness are important and matter. And we are here to keep you well to excel. Go have a great week, Illini. Let us know how you're doing. We'll catch you next time